Well, welcome to the Mining for Gold podcast, where we try to help you thrive and multiply your influence. And for this next episode, I'm so excited to have my friend John Wright, who is the National Director of the Vineyard Churches of UK and Ireland, also the pastor of the Trent Vineyard in Nottingham, England. And John, welcome. Welcome to the
Hi,
podcast.
Tom. Hi, great to be with you.
Oh, it's so good. I know you and Debbie have been dear to Beth and I. You've mentored us and poured into us, given us lots of input and wisdom from your side. But also, I was able to coach you, and we're going to get into that. Is that okay?
Absolutely. I can't believe it was 4 years ago, just over 4 years ago, that we had that relationship for a number of months. Really, really helpful.
And it was at a critical time, John, as I remember, because you were in the throes of what responsibilities do I take on, and I'm going to be national director, and what do I do with Trent? So
Yeah,
without getting into the detail, did that seem like a critical time in your journey?
it was. It was about a year and a half into us having taken on the extra
Okay.
role
Okay.
of leading the national movement. So, we had a pizza on our plate that was already pretty big.
Oh
And then
yeah.
on the plate came another pizza. And
Uh,
suddenly there was like a lot of pizza on the plate. And what do you do? How do you prioritize?
yeah.
Plus, there was some difficulties in that first year as well. So it was a crucial time to
Hmm.
just have an objective view to help us work out
Hmm.
what we're really for.
Beautiful, John. Such a privilege to get to journey with you and Debbie on that. And I want to get into the details of that. But first, John, because I've readers and listeners all over the world, I'd love for just the opportunity to just hear this podcast is about thriving and living in that sweet spot. And so, John, let's start maybe with the first couple minutes on just COVID-19. A year ago, things were shutting down, and you've got a thriving ministry there. You run a national leadership, and you're connected to the vineyard globally. John, personally, how did COVID-19 affect your thriving and your ability to do what you do?
Yeah, well, it of course affected everybody, but suddenly we were launched into having to make decisions and do things that weren't necessarily in our sweet spot. We had to revisit things at the coalface. Over the many years of building the church and then also in the movement, you kind of find your place of where what you're really for, what you're
Yes.
really good at,
Yes.
and you entrust to others and empower others to do what they're really good
Yes.
at. And suddenly, none of us were very good at anything. We suddenly had to
Right.
discover this thing called
Exactly.
church online, and in a few days, and so on.
Ah,
And so it was interesting to me that your book, Mining for Gold, was published in 2019,
it was.
before anyone had heard of COVID-19. So I
Yeah.
think it was a very opportune book, brilliant in its time, but really has spoken well into this season, because we all had to renegotiate what does it mean to actually thrive,
Yeah.
because most of us went into survival. Certainly in those
Yes.
early months of COVID, it was pretty demanding.
Yes, and those are phrases that I use repeatedly, like, are you surviving and thriving? And I would say COVID forced us all to a thriving kind of modality for a bit. As the months went on, how did you take care of your own mind and heart, where you didn't just totally tank? I mean, you've got so much responsibility. You can't just go in a cave somewhere and sit. How did you help yourself thrive during the challenges of the past year?
Well, first of all, I continued many of the disciplines that I had before then, some
Good,
of which have been
good,
helped by you or reinforced by my time with you.
good.
But things like rest and working out of that place,
Perfect.
things
Good.
like emotional replenishment.
Yes.
I wasn't allowed to ride my motorcycle for months, which was
Are you serious? You could not ride.
the previous year. I rode every single week of the 52,
Oh, John.
but I
Uh,
wasn't allowed to, you're not allowed to travel. I can't ride now. So I had to discover going for walks by the river and taking photographs of nature,
I've noticed that on Facebook. You've been doing some beautiful photos, but maybe that even you had to you couldn't do what you normally do, but you had to replace it with something maybe.
Yeah. So, I mean, self-care was crucial before I could, and Debbie and I could care for the many pastors in the movement
Right.
directly or indirectly, and also the people in our church or our staff. We just knew we've got to stay healthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
That's it.
pressures upon us are considerable, and certainly in those early, like the first couple of months, it was just insane. Our internet kept crashing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had to replace my iPhone because filming things, sermons, you do the whole take, and then suddenly it would be completely gone because it was crackling. And
Ah.
me and technology are enemies. I mean, I appreciate Zoom and I can talk to you today, but oh my goodness,
Wow.
I don't like reading instructions. I don't like doing
Yeah.
anything to do with
Yeah.
technology. And so it was, seasons of helplessness and
Yeah.
just getting in touch with, oh my goodness, how can we do this? But by the grace of God, he was very present, his grace
Amen.
and indeed his peace. So
Yeah.
I think going into it with a fairly full tank
Yeah. Yeah.
was really helpful. If I'd been running near empty when it started, I might have
Good
just,
point.
hit the bottom of the tank. But I've really felt sustained through it, and self-care and paying attention to
Nice.
relationships and stuff like that.
So just to kind of wrap this part up, maybe I have one question, then a second one. So when crises hit, John, you're saying to us as leaders, we've got to respond. We it's not negotiable whether we self-care. We need to take responsibility for how well we would be how's our mind, how's our energy level, how's our intimacy with Jesus. So am I hearing you correctly that say we can't delegate that?
Yeah, we want to pour our lives out for the sake of others and be there for others, but we're not going to be much use if we're just going under. If we're just stressed, ragged edge, wrung out. Nobody wants to follow a leader who's like that.
Amen.
And you just got to draw your own boundaries and pay
Perfect.
attention to the things that are important so that you can be a great resource to other people.
Fantastic. And just one encouragement before we turn towards your story, John, is like if you could have just a platform really to all people all over the world, as people are coming out of COVID, what have you learned as a leader that maybe you could share with us as leaders what we need to be paying attention to in our own thriving as we come out of the whole COVID-19 thing?
More of the same, really. I think as we went into this COVID, the initial lockdowns, we felt, okay, we need to just knuckle down and get to work. And it was like a sprint. And we all hoped it would be weeks at the maximum, a couple of months. And
We did, didn't we? We
then it
did.
became like a marathon.
It
And
did.
then as time's gone on, coming through this is like a triathlon. We're cycling, swimming, and running to
Good point.
coming out. It's not just going to be over. We know that
Right.
the vaccine's great, but this will be a gradual process. And we're
Wow.
coming into a new normal.
New
So
normal.
none of us have been here before,
Mm-mm.
let alone gone into lockdowns, survived through lockdowns, and now we've got to come out of it. So again, this whole thing of self-care is crucial, and also understanding what you're really for and how to empower other people to really press into what they're really for. It's more of the same, but it's going to be
Wow.
it's going to be intense for a long time, I think.
Well, that's a great springboard, John, to your story. So, and kind of what you experienced when we did some coaching. So, take me back to that. You had just taken on, I think, a few months prior. You say 18 months prior, the national role. I think we bumped into each other around. I don't remember when it was 2016 or so.
Mhm.
And then, what were the before coaching? What were you experiencing in your load that you were? I mean, two pizza pies. What was going on before coaching?
Trying to do anything well was a struggle because I was just going from pillar to post in a given day. I was on a Zoom call here, or I was in a meeting here, and then I was doing a national thing here and writing a talk here, and then engaging with something around the world there. And it was like, oh, like being
Yeah,
battered,
yeah.
like being hit round the head with a duffel bag full of socks.
Oh gosh,
You know, that feels like,
that's a good picture.
yeah, it doesn't hurt that much. It's just like, poof. Next
But
thing,
probably a sense of, like you said, am I doing anything well?
yeah, because you're just your bandwidth, my bandwidth was not sufficient to do anything really very well. So it was like just trying to get through it. Um, and I'd had mentoring relationships, been very blessed with some wonderful people who are many chapters ahead of me
Hmm.
through the decades.
Hmm.
And not only because we were blessed by those relationships, but we also sought those out. And then
Amen. Yeah.
times when we needed, like, oh my goodness, what do we do now? We knew who to call because
Hmm.
someone had done it
Hmm.
before us. The coaching relationship was really helpful because you didn't need to have gone there before us. You just needed to understand me, which you did profoundly, having
Hmm.
read all my strengths tests and so on,
Exactly.
and then asking me the pertinent questions like,
Mm.
what's causing you the most stress right
Mm.
now? Okay,
Hmm.
and how might that be addressed? And what are the action points we might bring to that?
Mm-hmm.
How do we move the football up the field, as you used to say?
Mm-hmm.
And then the next time we spoke, it was, so what did you do with that? And I would report on it.
Exactly.
There was an accountability to the goals that I'd set.
Mm-hmm.
So
Beautiful. So John, we first bumped into each other, I think, at Hawthorpe Hall, and you're hearing this coaching thing, Tom and Beth, but you went ahead and said, I'm just going to open myself up to this. But you found it, and I know you, John. You're a thinker and you're a processor, and you evaluate. Um, uh, and so you probably didn't know what you were getting into, maybe, as you got into coaching a little bit. Was that true?
yeah, I saw you do something at that meeting there with
True,
a couple of
true.
people on stage. Like, okay, he asks pertinent questions. In
Okay,
fact, sometimes uncomfortable or delving questions that
I do. I do.
sort of push the issue. And then, so how are you going to move this football up the field? It's slightly challenging in the relationship, but
Yeah,
it forces you to think, okay, this is going to crystallize my thinking.
right.
So I knew what I was sort of letting myself in for. It wasn't just going to be, oh, a casual conversation
Good,
with
good.
a nice guy.
Yeah,
It was going
yeah.
to be, I'm a learner by wiring. And so
Yes, I knew
this,
that.
this could help me achieve more for the kingdom of God and more fulfilling my ministry than without it.
Fantastic. So two pizza pies. We meet. We agree. John and Debbie. We did an individual coaching, and then we get into. Now let's get into some of the details. So as I recall, and I want you to be from your words and not mine. Um, there's the massive amount of bandwidth you're supposed to take care of. But as we looked at your design and how John comes alive, what he's for, what gives you energy, that part seemed to help, because I like to think of sweet spot as how much gas is in my motorcycle tank. If I got gas in the tank, I can go. If I got no gas in the tank, my motorcycle is not going to move. And we worked on that. Tell me a little bit about that process as you discovered your sweet spot.
I think it's probably fair to say that over the many years, I've pressed into learning about my gifts, my strengths, my personality profile. And so to a great extent, I was already functioning pretty much in my sweet spot.
Okay, good.
But I knew that that's a place where, I could flourish, where it's more enjoyable. When I
Yeah,
love what I'm doing, I've got much more energy for it,
yeah, yeah.
more productive, more fruitful, and so on. So talking with you helped me crystallize it or really hone it, I think, something that was already
Okay.
reasonably sharp. And you said, what are you for? What are you uniquely wired and created to do?
Hmm.
And is it, what are you doing which you don't need to do?
Right.
Anything. In fact, you asked me to do an analysis. I did it for 36 days. What today did I do
Yeah.
that someone else could have done and I shouldn't have done? And I remember in the 36 days, 35 of them, the answer was none, nothing.
John.
Uh, and there was an hour and a quarter I'd spent on some salary scales, irritated that someone had not taken care of that. It wasn't really my
Yeah.
role.
Yeah.
But actually, I was already, I
Yeah.
planned my time. I also gave you 8 months of my entire working life as
Yeah. Yeah. I
10 and a
remember.
half hours a day, 52 and a half hours a week of recorded, this is what I did in my working life.
Yeah.
But there wasn't much room for, for some people, they were easier coaches. Probably it's like, okay, you're doing loads of things you don't need to be doing. Why don't you delegate those, say no to those? But I was probably quite challenging because I was already pretty home.
Well, I've laughed at this more times because of the jeweler detail person in you. No one in my entire coaching career, and I've coached hundreds of people, did the 36 days down to the percentages. Now, but that's what makes John Wright. John Wright, you knew where things were. That was not a mystery. So as you're mostly in your sweet spot, then what about coaching started to shift? So you're saying it was more, what am I not good at, or what do I need to give away? Was that the most helpful? Kind of take me back to those first few sessions, and what were you learning?
I remember one of the early sessions, you said, what stresses you out the most? And I just had an incredible opportunity, which I felt I'd blown. And that was, I was on television and I had 3 million people listening to me
Yeah,
teach.
I remember. Yeah.
And I was so stressed going into it because I'd had about 1 hour. I'd asked my assistant to take something I'd said at the National Leaders Conference, to take the last section, turn it into a talk for the world, and
Oh, John. Oh my
and
goodness.
I was running so close to the wire with so many pressures that I didn't have time to do more than about an hour of preparation. So I went hurtling into that, got up on a stage, did the job, got off, went into the green room. Debbie said, "Oh my goodness, I wish you'd passed that by me. That was so," and she critiqued it for good
Ah,
reason. If
ah,
I had another 2 hours, I could have
ah,
transformed the talk into something much better, but I didn't. So I said, that stressed me. And I
yeah,
point to the microphone when I'm not confident with what I'm saying.
yeah. I remember. I
So
remember.
you said, well, what would it take never to do that again?
Amen. I remember that.
And so I said, well, what about being prepared always about 3 days ahead of a deadline?
Wow.
So
And
you
what you
said,
said earlier is you've kept that, John. That has been a practice that you've internalized.
totally. So you said, well, what would it take to do that? I said, well, I need to work hard for a few days to get that, lead time, and then I'll try and live by that. And then you said, well, who could help you live by that?
Right.
So I said, well, my assistant who runs my diary, she could hold me accountable to, am I prepared 2 or 3 days ahead?
Fantastic.
And she's still my assistant, and we've done this now for the last, whatever it is, 4 years. And so generally, like my Easter Day sermon, I just in the last half hour finished it all but about 20 minutes work.
How about that? How about
So
that? And
I get
it
to
just
live relatively stress-free because I'm not
yeah.
jumping from one deadline to the others.
And
And
so it basically those practical coaching steps, I want to try to tie this in for people that are listening all over the world, that it wasn't these cataclysmic decisions that helped John. It was honing the knife and saying, I'm already mostly in my sweet spot, but there are a few energy stealers or a few effectiveness stealers, and the coaching got you to practical steps, but the practical small steps, correct me if I'm wrong, led to significant results.
yeah, I mean, that was a key small step. You think that's a small thing to do, but if you do it and you actually do it consistently, it revolutionizes your pressure.
Whoa, John, briefly describe the revolutionary, just briefly. How does it make you a better leader to make, because a lot of people they'll coach with me and they'll think, Tom, that's not that big of a step. I'm like, but wait a minute, it's what you need. So don't minimize it. John, how did it maybe revolutionize?
Well, of course, there have been very busy seasons. I
Yeah,
remember once making a cup of tea. I love really nice tasting fluids, and tea. I got into quality tea, and it said, I put this tea bag of lovely tea, and it said, let it rest in there for 4 minutes. And I remember thinking, 4 minutes? You must be joking. I don't have 4 minutes to be away from my desk. I've got to get back to work. And I
wow,
thought, oh my goodness, that's like, okay, something seriously wrong with your life if you're
wow,
running from pillar to post. Haste, feeling hurried.
yeah,
So the difference here is I don't feel hurried, not all the time. It's not 100% revolution, but I generally don't feel
yeah.
hurried because I'm generally prepared for the things that are coming
That.
up.
And we come along next year and we hear John Mark Comer, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. That was a practical example of eliminating a mindset of hurry.
Yeah, I'd taught for 2 years at the national conference before he taught the following year at our national conference.
Right.
And I taught on emotional and spiritual well-being and physical well-being. And then the following year, I talked on rest,
Yeah.
completely related.
Yeah.
And then I sat next to him at our conference and I said, I loved your book, but I did the test in the book because it says basically we're all, hurried, aren't we?
Mhm.
I did the test. I said a few years ago, I would have scored high on every one. I'm seriously hurried as a person. But I said to him, I just scored myself again. And I don't think I'm being deceiving myself, but I think I just scored like zero.
Oh,
I
John.
think it was 20 errors or something. I said, that doesn't characterize my life now. It
Oh,
did all my life up
beautiful.
until recent years, but I was really encouraged by that.
Well, I would just say, and I'm just going to throw parentheses in here for my listeners here, that the book Rest, I just looked at it on my shelf this morning. You recommended that to me. But it's that, John, when we learn these types of things, not only does it help us in our effectiveness, our health gets better, our blood pressure, our stress indexes, and the things that are the not good stress really improve, and that makes us better leaders. So let's
Yeah.
shift now. So we did that. You started to anticipate that help, but then we came to this thing where I remember, I'm gonna let you say it, but I remember you saying, I need something for me, but I don't know where to find it. And I think I asked you, where do you get life? And what was your answer?
Riding my motorcycle.
That was it. That was it. So
Which
we went into this riding.
at the time I was like, but that often gets squeezed out, and 3 or 4 weeks goes by and I haven't even gone out for an hour.
I
And you say,
remember it.
"Oh, you know,
I
why?"
remember it. And so I'm thinking to myself, this one's so easy. Like, what would it take for John Wright to get out on his motorcycle and take me through? I just think this is a fun story, but take me through you first. Well, I don't have time to ride my motorcycle, Tom, but I get life out. Take me through that. And it became a rhythm. Kind of just tell the story.
Yeah. I think you said, and also I had a psychotherapist who also said this, you will be a better husband, a better father, a better grandfather, a better leader of the movement and locally if you are replenished,
Yeah,
if you get out and ride.
that's right.
So it moved from being a selfish pastime that I would like
Yeah,
to do to kind of escape it or get out into nature, into the mountains or whatever,
yeah.
into actually this is like almost, this will make me work much more effectively.
It will. It
And
will.
so I would think, you know, I've got 2 hours. I could sit down, or I could flick through Facebook, or I could watch some stupid thing on Netflix, or I could get out and ride. It's not raining.
Nice.
I went out, you know, -5 degrees, and as long as it wasn't snowy or actually icy, I rode, you know, a lot following that point. In fact, you encouraged me to get a younger bike. I had a bike that
I
was
did.
over 20 years old and was unreliable. So
Yeah.
you
Safer.
encouraged me
Safer.
to buy another one.
And so as you did that, so I'm just kind of projecting here, but the load doesn't change. I'm still have two pies. I'm a husband, I'm a father and a grandfather. All that, none of that changes. But how is John different when he's paying attention? I call it, John, the gas tank. I'm using your motorcycle example. If I don't watch the gas tank, I end up somewhere in the mountains with no gas, and I'm stuck because I've run out of gas. But it felt like to me, as I talked to you through the months, you were renewed through doing something that poured into your gas tank. Is that true?
Yeah, so the dials that I've talked about for many years, got them from Bill Hybels originally, really helpful spiritual, emotional, and physical dials.
Yeah,
How do you keep them topped up, but also keep aware of them? Because if they're running down
exactly.
near empty, it's your responsibility to do something which will lift them. You can't just hope that life will slow down or work it out and somehow fill them up again, because life has a tendency to be erosive
It
if you
does.
just, you know, the expectations on me locally and nationally would just swamp me, and I'd go under if I didn't have a very
Exactly.
clear sense of what I'm for, but also how to replenish the gas tank, if you like. Um,
Mm.
uh, yeah,
Well, what I am very encouraged by, which we hadn't talked in a while now, was that the change of that, of not only the 3-day preparation but the writing has been a sustained benefit. Would you say that, John?
yeah, absolutely. Um, I think, you know, there weren't that many things which I took from our coaching relationship and really put into practice. But when you discover some things like, yeah, that's important, and actually the steps and the moving the football up the field, the accountability until it becomes a habit, if you like.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
also read a great book I'd recommend to you, along with Rest,
Hmm.
by Alex Soo-Young Kim Pang. But the other book is Atomic Habits by
I
James
bought it.
Clear.
I have it.
I mean, if the guy's
Yeah,
crazily disciplined, and
yeah,
if you did 10% of the things he suggests, it would
yeah.
revolutionize most lives.
Oh
So I
yeah.
took habit stacking as a crucial discipline, and I
Nice.
realized that, you know, I was very poor at physical exercise, and so one of the things in the dials is you've got to be sleeping well, eating sensibly, and
Yeah,
you've got to be exercising.
yeah.
I had boxing training for a couple of years, but then I sustained a repetitive micro trauma injury, so I couldn't actually hit a punch bag anymore.
Really?
So I had to stop. Anyway, I bought a multi-gym and some dumbbells and barbell, and I've got that downstairs. So actually for a year and 3 quarters now, I've worked out an average of 5 days a week. But it's first thing in the morning, get up, gym kit, do that, shower, start the day. So it's finding just a crucial few things,
Yeah.
building them into your life, and I have from the time, you know, of our coaching,
Fantastic.
which
Fantastic.
which do make a big difference long term.
Yeah. I want to move towards one a word that you've used that I I don't know if I didn't coin it, but I've certainly owned it, and that is the issue of sweet spot. My story was when Bob Logan coached me, and people have heard my story, and I began to say to understand there are certain places that are effortless for me, that I don't have to really think about them. Another one is that I could achieve a level of excellence in that maybe few people could because it's how I'm wired. I just found the more percentages I lived out of that life was good, fruit was being born, and I felt fulfilled. Talk
Yeah.
about sweet spot. What in coaching did we do together that helped find the word you use is what you're for? How did that work for you?
Well, you'd seen all the tests that I had done, and I'd seen them and realized, crucially, Ephesians 2:10 is, we're created for good works that he's
Yes,
prepared in advance for each of us to do.
yes,
And if you're doing the good works you were prepared in advance to do, there's going to be flow.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
you're going to be in your sweet spot, actually.
exactly.
If you're doing too much, it means you're probably doing some things that God prepared in advance for someone else to do.
That's
So
right.
think about passing them on to those other people. You're
Yeah.
actually robbing that person from being empowered to do what they were called to. If
Which you
you're,
wrote, which you wrote in the forward of the book. That was a key component of
yeah,
what you wrote. And so, did you experience that?
yeah, identifying what I was for and like
Exactly.
my strengths. So what do you do that's life giving,
Yeah.
even if it's really demanding? So I think in the course of our relationship, there was a season where I had to uh, ask the church for vast sums of money to build
I
a
remember.
community center and to extend the auditorium
I
and that sort
remember.
of thing, making room for more. And actually, that is a place of my sweet spot. So
Yeah.
my top five strengths:
Yeah.
responsibility, belief, achiever, self-assurance, and maximizer.
Yep. I
All
remember. Yeah.
five, all five got used because I had
In
to,
that space of gaining the resources for the new facility.
yeah, and creating a brochure and creating the design. I was involved in actually physically designing that on
Yeah.
paper and so on with others. But it used everything. So actually, it was very life-giving, even though it was an awful lot of pressure on top of everything. And I
Amazing.
remember when we first originally built the church building, the warehouse, was 16 years ago or something. Um, I used to be working on things and talks and whatever I have to do in my life, having meetings. But then often at like 11 at night, I'd put my tools down and it's like, yes, get the plans out, get the Tipex and the ruler and the pencil out, and actually design, because
Design.
I'm a three-dimensional designer by original training,
Yeah. Yeah.
very creative by nature, and
Right.
leveraging that, and then going after, for instance, persuading the local council to let us have planning permission, change of use, zoning,
Yeah.
against impossible odds. That was like,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
I'm up for the
Yeah.
challenge of that, and
Wow.
all the other things. So yeah, I knowing what I'm really in my sweet spot, if I can try and focus on those things and let other people, well, flourish in their sweet spot.
Yes.
I just know that some people love doing spreadsheets.
They do.
They love doing technology and fixing my iPhone. I,
They
I'm,
do.
I'm not going to even bother to go there.
Right.
I'll let them do that.
Wow. So such a beautiful story of sweet spot. And so I remember going through that and just the encouragement to sort of give you permission to allow yourself what gives you energy and to say no, you could do those things. I often teach there's this threshold between what I can do and what I must do. And it felt like you were letting go of you can do all those things. You're a very capable guy. But there's this sense when you're doing that design work, it's almost like something you must do. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I think it's probably fair.
It
It's certainly the things I would thrive doing as opposed
Right.
to survive as tasks that I had to do. There's something else you mentioned, which was how could you combine the things where you could really leverage your gifts with things that are replenishing?
Yeah, exactly.
I said, well, I think visiting pastors, actually, I
Right.
could sit down and stay a night with a pastor or have dinner with a
I remember that.
people. And so you said, well, what about getting on your motorcycle and going to see them? And so I went to Wales and Bristol and Chester and Manchester and just got on my bike and, I called them up and said, hey, I'm free for tomorrow evening. Can I come and see you?
Of course, they're going to say yes.
And so they were delighted and we had really fruitful times. And I'll do more of that, but it's been a whole year, of course. I've not been able to
Wow.
and visit people.
Gosh, it's so John, thank you so much for this. And just a couple more questions. So you mentioned quite often the role of the thinking partner coach, where I was with you, but accountability that's built into coaching. And I have experienced leaders who welcome accountability and they tend to really catapult into something. And then the ones who shy from any healthy, loving accountability tend to stay stuck. Maybe could you share your thoughts with us on why you embrace that? I mean, you don't need to be accountable to anybody if you didn't want to. You're who you are and you have all this authority and influence, but yet you allowed me as a coach to walk with you. Why do you feel that's so important for a leader?
I think I'm wired, I'm very intentional. I don't like to waste time. So if I'm going to spend time with a coach, it better be worth it. Otherwise, I'm not
Exactly.
going to do it. So,
Yeah.
so what's the point of having a delightful conversation and then forgetting it
Good,
until 3 months later you've got your next call?
good point.
So for me, it was like, no, I want to grow. I want to get better at this. I want to do this well. I want to excel. I want to, just do things well if I possibly can. So the accountability is, so what are you going to do before our next call? Okay, I need to do that then. And if I just ignored it and not been intentional about that, you'd have said to me,
I would
so what was the point of our last call then? You've
would have.
not done anything with it. And I'd be embarrassed,
I would have.
not only wasting my time, wasting your time, but also
That's
I'd be
correct. I would
embarrassed.
have done that.
So it's like, no, without the accountability, you're just kidding yourself. You may as well not bother.
Yeah, and I would say to the coaches that are there's a lot of my followers are coaches who are trying to coach in a more kingdom, Holy Spirit kind of way. I would say to listen to what John just said, that there is an element. Uh, Sometimes we wish would you try not to be too much for people and maybe nice, where there's a way to be supportive but hold people accountable, and it's for their good. It values time, it values the coaching relationship that you're in and the investment that you're making. So don't be afraid to I was a little intimidated to coach John Wright, I'll be honest with you. And I'm thinking, but you know what, my sweet spot is doing this. So as I got into it, my confidence grew, and I wasn't afraid to hold you accountable to those things that were good for you. A
Mhm.
couple more questions as we kind of move towards a conclusion. As you thought of coaching, and you so blessed us with the ability I've traveled now to many churches all across the UK, taught on coaching. We just got the coaching ability to do some training with Vineyard UK, which is a privilege. When you think of what you experienced, John, and then I'm going to back the window out, maybe back to your larger sphere. You influence people all over the world, all over the UK, inside and outside. Many people listen to this that are not in Vineyard. What would you say to us from your experience with me and coaching that leaders should consider? Why should they consider it? Why should they maybe even invest in it? And how can it help them become a better leader?
Well, you've heard me talk about the value in my own life. I think it's also it's trainable, which is delightful. You can't train mentors. They're, especially when you're leading a national movement with my wife, which I do, and also a large church, there are not that many people who've done both those things and negotiated some of the challenges we have to handle.
True.
So we have a few mentors, but they're far and few between. But coaches, as long as you can train someone in the skills of
Right.
coaching,
Good.
you need to be able to discern what the pertinent questions are and ask
Mm.
you. So it's very
Trainable.
transferable, trainable, and I've been delighted to see the work you've done and others have done now, Nicola Bass and so on, through the UK movement
Yeah.
and the teams that they've developed.
Yeah.
So, we're offering coaching to, I think it's now all of our pastors,
Right.
and I've been encouraged to see them take that up because it's such a useful thing. Not something you probably need all the time.
No.
We had a coaching relationship for, I don't know, what, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very useful at that point.
Mhm.
Um, so I've forgotten the question I was actually answering there.
Well, no, you're answering it in that if I was a young leader who was planting a church in the UK, maybe I was with New Wine or another church, King's Cross, something. I'm doing kingdom work on I want to make a difference, or I'm a vineyard pastor and I just got released to go to a new city. I guess I would ask from you as a respected leader, how should they consider coaching as a John, my heart's always multiplication. I want you to make more fruit, have more time for your family. I want you to thrive in every level. How would you tell me as a young preacher, church planter, to consider embracing coaching?
I'd say read the foreword of Tom's book.
Okay, okay.
And you'll
There you
see
go. There you go.
it's like basically do it. If you have the opportunity to have a coach for a period of time, I'd say take up the opportunity. What have you got to lose except you've got to put some effort into setting some goals and then being accountable to them. But really, there's so much to gain.
Well, John, it has just been a delight. Yeah, I mean, I don't know when we would again be in the UK, but to you and Debbie, I love dearly. You really gave us an opportunity to share this passion. It sounds like it personally helped you. Just thank you. And is there any thoughts that you'd like to share with anyone about this whole process before we end with prayer?
I think you've drawn out all the gold that was in this
Well,
period.
John,
Nothing to add.
okay, it'd be a blessing if you would pray. Would you just pray for leaders? There's people literally around the globe that listen to this, and they're leaders in missions and all kinds of areas, coaches as well. Would you just pray for us?
Sure. God, we thank you that you have created every one of us uniquely. You created us for good works, which you've prepared in advance for us to do. And Lord, we just ask that through coaching and indeed through the leading of your Spirit, that you would reveal to us those good works which are your choice for us, your design for us, what you've prepared for us, and help us identify those which are for someone else. And for any leader out there who feels like they're striving, they're not thriving, they're just about surviving under the pressures, would you give them insight, wisdom? Would you lead them? We thank you, Lord, that coaching works even in secular society with people who are not believers, but with you and the breath of your Spirit and aligning with your creation, there is so much to be gained. And I just ask, Lord, would you bless every single person listening to this podcast? And as they consider coaching, as they go into their future, Lord, let grace be upon it. Grace, grace, grace. Amen.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much. Well, it's been a pleasure having you, and hope to soon see you in some place, maybe over in the UK. But I bless you and all that you've done and what you've meant in my life.
Thank you,
Awesome.
and our love to you and Beth.
Okay.
See you soon.
See you soon.